Hi, I'm Jalamoth, the curator of all things curious. And something well worth our curiosity, in my opinion, is the wide world of aesthetics. The practice of aestheticism is everywhere, and believe it or not, even if you think you don't have an aesthetic, you really do. Dozens of them. You just don't know yet that hundreds of thousands of people out there are just like you, and you really haven't realized yet that practically anything can be a vibe. Oh, and I should mention, I totally baited your ass. This isn't really an iceberg as much as it is a ranking video, but they're functionally the same thing. This one will just get way more views. Unfortunately, with the current YouTube landscape, saying ranking over 100 aesthetics just isn't good enough anymore. But you can't really get angry because me ranking them is just more content than it would be if I was just listing them all off. But yeah, these aren't going to be in any specific order or anything. My personality, past experiences, nostalgia, etc. is the one and only thing guiding how I rank these, so I'll be the first one to say that none of you will 100% agree with my takes, and that's just the nature of the situation. I don't really think there's anything more divisive and biased than your preference in aesthetics. Two people who act incredibly alike could still have totally different vibes. So I'm sorry if I make fun of your favorite niche microgenre. I gotta draw the line somewhere, and it'll probably be at some shit like Dark Academia Stimwave. Now, normally, I wouldn't condone just giving yourself a whole bunch of labels. Not only can it become exhausting, but it kind of encourages segregation. But I truthfully think that the only thing coming out of this modern wave of aesthetics is quite the opposite. There are now millions of communities all over the world connecting over the nichest of niche subjects. It's amazing. And many of you out there will shudder as I defend wikis all over the world, but those are my people. Those are curators. So big thanks to everyone who's contributed to the Aesthetics Wiki, which is where I pulled nearly every topic in today's video. We'll be going over dozens of the entries from this expansive list, which isn't really much of it at all. Maybe if this does well, I'll come back because I do have more to say, but that's entirely in your hands now. Without further ado, let's begin ranking every aesthetic. But not really every aesthetic. Oh, the iceberg. Frutiger Arrow. Somehow the biggest aesthetic on the internet right now. And maybe I'm just intimately aware of 2007, but this really does hit hard for me. These kinds of graphics were plastered all over doctors' offices, or any office really. It's trying to remind the wage slaves of somewhere better, a literal oasis painted onto the wall. But despite this quite sad and definitely sterile art movement, children of the time didn't really see it that way. They saw it for what it was. Pretty colors, soothing skies, the Happy Meal toys with the water inside, Windows XP, early iOS, it all feels fake and artificial, but never really lonely or scary like other aesthetics tend to be. I attribute that to the addition of the natural element of Frutiger Arrow. Splashing water, glistening fruit, perfectly mowed rolling hills, endless cloudy skies. It's really serene and it makes the scary world of technology seem a little bit more natural. With the horrifying truth that AI is getting scarier and scarier every day, I think humans should embrace this, and I'm glad it's coming back around. B tier. Frutiger Eco. Frutiger Eco is the same design philosophy of its brother Arrow, but focuses less on the water and skies, but the greenery in between. This really is the vibe of being green, recycling, renewable energy, hope, but I don't know, see? Now I'm not sure if I'm an optimist or anything, but I feel like there are cooler, more interesting aesthetics if you like the theme, values, or even look of this one. Frutiger Metro. Now, I thought this would be some sort of simple offshoot of Frutiger Arrow, rounding off the 3 Frutiger Pokemon starters, but let me actually show you how many layers this has. So it does get its name from Frutiger Arrow, which is expanded into the Frutiger family, including various aesthetics like Flat Metro, which spec'd into Musica Metro, becoming Grunge Metro in the late 2000s, only to be recombined with music into Rave Metro. Companies found this a little bit less profitable than they thought, so they brought back the color, resulting in Funky Metro. This is just one of the ingredients of this aesthetic. Funky Metro was then spliced with Vector Garden and Vector Bloom, finally culminating in Frutiger Metro. C tier. I just don't care anymore. This really peaked at Funky Metro. Nobody's ever going to beat those iPod commercials. Abstract Tech. Is this the vibe of alien machinery, Rube Goldberg, Dr. Seuss level stuff that just looks out of this world and awe-inspiring? No. It's this Tron-looking Hackerman slop. D. I have always hated this look, the stylized view of technology from the perspective of a dumbass who's never seen the inside of a computer in their life. Some may find it charming, but not me. You can keep your hexagons and AI and Iron Man type-ish technology, ew. Dwarfic. Dwarfic sounds like a Weird Al aesthetic, but it's actually just corporatism, but in the future. It loosely stands for daylight orange futuristic graphics, I guess, which is a pretty accurate descriptor. Except I don't like corporatism, I don't like minimalism, I hate abstract tech, and I could take or leave futurism. The Aesthetics Wiki references Rocket League, Tracer from Overwatch, and Vector from Despicable Me as influencers. Seems like the whole orange thing is like incredibly instrumental to this one, but that's kind of like all it's got going for it for me. C, because I do like Superhot and Cluster Truck. And it doesn't say Tron, but Like, come on. Dollar store vernacular. Wow, what a title. This is like a infomercial vibe. Anything that looks sort of cheap and just pumped out for the sake of profit. I don't really hate it, but if this is your aesthetic, why? Other than those insanely creative Adult Swim infomercials, like Too Many Cooks, unedited footage of a bear, and This House Has People in It, but that just makes it yet another pretty effective yet niche form of horror. I'd say a C. Could get into a B if these weren't the only things holding this genre together. Weathercore. Like, weather channels? I mean, I dig the visuals, I guess, but how much mileage can you realistically get out of the most forgettable and dated media known to man? Imagine if an immortal alien came down to Earth. He starts to really like TV, and then is like, I gotta see it all. He starts from the beginning, and once he gets up to the 70s and 80s, notices that there's a million episodes of a person in a suit saying numbers in front of a green screen, detailing how hot it's gonna be in every random little town he's never heard of. I don't exactly know where I'm going with this. What I'm trying to say is don't waste your time dwelling on the Weather Channel. There's a reason they don't do reruns. It was meant to be left in the past. D. Dark Nautical. Do I even need to explain why scary stories set on the ocean are so effective? Google lighthouse and scroll until you find something scary. I doubt it'll take long. A. Liminality. Okay, so this one is in a unique position. I think many have become adverse to this movement, if you could call it that, simply because of oversaturation. Try as you may, if you've stumbled upon this video algorithmically, chances are you've been bombarded with photos of liminal spaces for the better part of a decade now with no reprieve. But I think there's a reason it's stuck around for so long and will continue to permeate the internet, and that's simply because it's interesting. It makes us think. Think about what a parking lot means when there's no one to park in it. A school hallway during the summer, a hospital with no patients, the mall right before everything is open. I find value in the fact that everyone can look at this and see something different. Some may just see empty spaces. Some may see something haunting, a sense of discomfort that feels legitimately scary. Or it may do the opposite and comfort you, caressing you as you sink into the humming of the fluorescent lights and the static of the white noise all around you. As you may be able to tell, I'm quite fond of this. I find empty spaces oddly alluring. I have a desire to wander empty halls, find myself lost. Like a siren in the ocean, it feels like something is calling me over, pulling me in. Kinda like when you're drunk outside and just have the urge to start sprinting. A tier. Analog horror. This peaked with Local 58. I'm too old to pretend to care what the Mandela catalog is. The Mandela effect already pisses me off enough. I will admit this was once very effective to me. Every kid with access to Adult Swim has analog horror wired into their brain. But in 2024, it's just old already. I'll throw it in C. It can be done really tastefully, like the aesthetic of Annie Nexpo video, definitely including Nick and Ryan, and this amazing artist I follow on Twitter who makes all sorts of cool twisted analog stuff, Dr. Nowhere. But a lot of it can feel really samey. If you're a fan of whatever's on screen right now, I'm sorry, I really haven't consumed too much of this. Moths don't have time for ARGs. Low poly. Low polygons is the aesthetic of early PS1 and PC games. It was born entirely of limitation, but in an era where just about anybody can 3D model, even a fucking AI, this limitation has become an aesthetic, a vibe that people specifically attempt to reach, and I think it's a good one. It's got all the things a quintessential aesthetic needs, aside from a clothing style. It has the nostalgia factor, clear artistic vision and flair, themes of loneliness and entrapment, but also childlike wonder. These blocky shapes are really curiously, innately childlike. Sure, it's because we all played low-poly games as kids, but deeply, psychologically, I think it could also be because their similarity to whittled wooden carvings, some of mankind's first toys. Low-poly makes me think and feel, and that's the most important thing an aesthetic can do. B tier. Candyland. The trope of being in a city made of candy with people made of candy is surprisingly everywhere. Why has this permeated through culture so thoroughly? And does it creep anybody else out too? The Candy Kingdom and all the scary stuff that happens there really doesn't help, but the idea of an edible, quickly biodegradable life has always been disgusting and disturbing to me. F tier. Cottagecore. Some may call it overrated, some may call it overplayed, but the fact remains that cottagecore is cozy as hell. If you hate it, what are you hating? Grass? Bunnies? Frolicking? There are a zillion things on the internet to hate, things far too romanticized for their own good. You could not catch me being a hater of the warm embrace of nature's serenity. A. Aestheticism. Well, we finally made it. The aesthetic. I feel like it deserves at least an A for that alone, right? This is kind of just the vibe of beauty itself, and it comes from the art movement of aestheticism, which valued the beauty of the world we live in. Gorgeous landscapes inhabited by stunning people, flowers everywhere, wildlife teeming, a real worldliness to it. So much stunning artwork comes from this movement, and without it, this video would in no way exist. It's unsurprisingly the granddaddy of all aesthetics. But now, with Ghibli movies and whatever else kids these days do, they want to return to this beauty, feel what it would have been like to be a person in one of those euphoric paintings of an earthly oasis, which spawned ethereal. This is just modern aestheticism, but I do appreciate and understand the distinction between the two. The aestheticism movement is sort of locked in the 1800s in a way, which can invoke a lot of negative connotations. But ethereal is removed from a timeline, so it still has the sense of tranquility but none of the baggage of the 19th century, like inequality. Still, I'm gonna throw it like in the middle because it's just kind of the vibe of every fairy tale. I'm not really gonna praise or hate on the vibe of Disney movies, it's just too sanitized to escape like a sea. The delicacy of it all is just too rich. Maximalism. Based! I'm without a doubt a maximalist. What curator isn't? This is the vibe of too much going on. Think Spencer Shea's apartment. I think this is normal and kind of human. Some people may claim the opposite, but they aren't watching this video because they're getting mauled by bears for living in the woods. Be yourself. Collect a bunch of trinkets and memories. Don't leave any empty space on your walls. Wear that cheetah print with the corduroy. Fuck it. Minimalism. Boo! Do you hate yourself? What do you do all day? I'm sorry, honey, we can't get a TV this year either. They still don't have one in eggshell. Now, if you're a Buddhist or just like broke or something, don't feel bad. Male living spaces are actually pretty base too. But if you're actively being a minimalist just because, then you probably won't be upset with my middling review of your lifestyle. C for cream. Wabi-sabi. Are you familiar with kintsugi, the mainly Japanese practice of mending pottery with gold lace lacquer? That is wabi-sabi. Accepting the imperfections of life, and shining some light and appreciating them instead of covering them up or throwing it all away. Everyone is asymmetrical, nobody is flawless, and finding beauty in those flaws is what makes us human. If you can find beauty everywhere you look, then you're probably enlightened enough to understand why wabi-sabi is S tier. 2000s anime. Right now, anime is pretty totally in the mainstream. But do you remember years ago when liking anime got you shoved into a locker? Yeah, this is why. Anime in the 90s was iconic, risk-taking, and often beautiful. But then for a while, for some reason, it seemed like we got nothing but characters that looked like this. I'm more than glad this style is as good as dead today. D. Moe swag. Must have hurt your feelings. My temper hit the ceiling. No, I wanna talk to you. Oh girl, come on. But the maintain this living. I know that not giving. City pop. City pop is awesome, and hey, whatever gets more people into jazz is a W for me. Plus it does have a pretty dang cute and well-refined aesthetic, and it's not just trapped in the 80s, it can be done modern really well. Just look at Ginger Root. A. Shoegaze. Seriously, where exactly does the line get drawn between genre and aesthetic? That's too loaded of a question for this video, I think. Staring at your Crocs and droning on the guitar isn't going to get you any higher than a C though. 2K7. This is simply the vibe of 2007. It was a good time. The wiki for this one just basically describes it as imagine being in a Timbaland music video, which coincidentally has been on my bucket list for quite a while now. B. Electro swing. Ew. D tier. I've always thought this was so tacky. Flapper dubstep? Get away from me. The only, and I mean only thing salvaging this entire genre is the song We No Speak No Americano. Incredibly common W for Just Dance 4. Juggalo. Not to be confused with clowncore, juggalos and juggalettes are all over the place. They constantly rant about how killing people is badass, but they're also the type to send you a sweet Christmas card around the holiday season. Staples of this community are the iconic Insane Clown Posse face paint, baggy clothes that look and most likely smell like they come from 2010, and an affinity for Faygo soda. That last part goes hard, C tier. 50s suburbia. Immediate D tier. Is the 50s also really creepy to anybody else? Thinly veiled racism and mass production to a horrifying scale, anyone? This plastic wonderland is honestly really surreal and unsettling. I'd rather be in Slender Man than walk through this place at night. Inside the game, not inside the... All of it just feels so uncanny. The only thing keeping it out of F is Nuketown, and I'm dead serious. Rockabilly. That's a Steak and Shake. Oh, so it's like Dinercore? Jackrabbit Slims type shit? I like that. It's like 50s suburbia, but I think the difference is 50s suburbia surrounds the people who created and thrived in this weird, creepy time period, while this is more for the greasers. And the difference between upper and lower class in this sense is immense. It has all the humanity the suburbia lacked. Ever see the movie The Outsiders? That alone makes this like at least B tier. I live in America, so when I was a kid, I used to go to this rockabilly McDonald's that literally had a floating car from the 50s suspended in a giant vat of blue fluid, just right in the middle of the McDonald's. It was awesome. Yankee. Insanely, of all the things to be globally inclusive, rockabilly made it all the way to Japan. Yankee is a derivative of Yankee, which for my foreign viewers is another word for American. I think Elvis was strangely popular over there for one reason or another. You've likely seen it before in anime, spray-tanned thugs squatting in the streets, big slick back pompadour and all. Most notably Josuke Higashikata, or the Yankee whose hair he's trying his best to replicate. But people really dress like this there, for like 50 years too. I think something about this is weirdly charming, other than like the ones who ended up joining the Yakuza. Still cool though, B tier. Now I really want to see a greaser and Yankee buddy cop set in the 50s. Anybody else? American Kitsch. Again, this is just 50s suburbia, but better. This time being almost entirely comprised of the vibe of Norman Rockwell paintings. Again, this has so much personality and humanity. It's the vibe of the American dream, not from a corporation, but from the people just trying to get by. I like it, and was gonna give it a C, until I remembered this giant hand-me-down book my nonna gave me, a Norman Rockwell art book, and I don't know, alright? It's a nice aesthetic, okay? B. Does this video mean anything to you if you aren't intimately aware of American culture? Please let me know. Let me know in the comments what some foreign aesthetics are that you think go incredibly hard. Beatnik, Gopnik, Swagapinos. I think Pachucos are my favorite. These people look like if you brought the Day of the Dead back to life, and I want to fiesta with them until estoy muerto. Vintage Americana. Okay, so to my knowledge, this aesthetic is literally patriotism for the United States of America, but you really like Lana Del Rey. Okay. Lana Del Rey stands, you will never be juggalos. D tier. Vaporwave. I made a whole documentary about Vaporwave back when I didn't know how to make videos, and it's still probably my best video. It's been copyrighted and cut to hell and back, so go check it out before it gets wiped forever one day. Something that did genuinely warm my heart though, and make it all worth it, was finding out somebody had sampled my voice from that video in their Vaporwave mix. I stumbled across it and was flabbergasted. It was truly a unique feeling. I'll leave a link down below if you want to go take a listen. But Vaporwave's got it going S. I have such a deep and complex connection to it, and this stone pillar that sits next to me in every single video really represents that quite nicely. Remix culture and the nostalgia wave will never go out of style, and when it does, just remix it again. Mallsoft. Mallsoft, like a surprising amount of aesthetics, originally began as a branch of Vaporwave. Malls of the 80s and shopping nostalgia was always a part of the Vapor, but Mallsoft really focused on the commercial aspects of it all. The early Memphis design of the 80s, the contrast between the golden eras of shopping centers and the decrepit state they're found in today, and that oh-so-sweet music that seems to be playing from nowhere. Mallsoft is great in my opinion. It has clear, interesting intentions, it's a super early predecessor for the whole liminal space craze. A. A lot of my favorite Vaporwave tracks I've ever heard can be classified as Mallsoft, and I love how this affects different eras of humans. Older people may find this vibe romantically nostalgic and sweet, while some younger folk may just see it as a corporate backrooms hellscape. I'm in the sweet spot between and can appreciate how much depth this aesthetic really has if you go looking for it. I wish I had the time to go into hauntology right now, but that was honestly too deep even for my Vaporwave documentary, and it deserves its own video in all honesty. New Wave. It's really interesting to see what music genres are so potent and influential that they can be classified as an aesthetic, but New Wave is definitely more than enough to make the mark. Let's rip the band-aid off now, this is S tier. New Wave is the cool way of saying post-punk. Rhythm and blues turned into rock and roll, which morphed into rock, that evolved into metal, divided into punk, and then put all together here at the end. It's a marriage of many styles, yet pushes every boundary it can find. Oingo Boingo, Talking Heads, Devo, Talk Talk, the B-52s, the Vapors, Tears for Fears, Naked Eyes, Duran Duran, Kajagoogoo, Simple Minds, Flock of Seagulls, The Fix, The Police, Pet Shop Boys. For me, it's almost like this is where true music was born. Post-punk, everyone realized to hell with labels. They're less than useless, and you should just make whatever you want. It didn't need a name, but if it was anything, it really was a new wave. A lot of anti-corporate aesthetics really owe their everything to this. I mean, come on, Vaporwave wouldn't have anything to sample if these guys hadn't broken the mold and created the 80s. While we're still on the topic, just for this special video, I've partnered up with Vapor95, the #1 aesthetics apparel store in the world. If you get any of the cool stuff on their site by heading to vapor95.com/Jalamoth or use code Jalamoth at checkout, you'll get 15% off your whole order. I got this super slick beach towel, a kickin' pair of boots, which to be totally honest are mad comfy, and this massive tapestry to christen my shrine of Mac. If you're too lazy to type it in, the link will be right down in the description, so go check it out. Up next is... Corporate Memphis. The worst kind of minimalism handpicked by Mark Zuckerberg himself. Don't confuse this with Memphis, which is an A. Memphis also has a semi-corporate design made for simplicity, but it was also a legitimate movement. The Memphis Milano Group from Italy was an inspired furniture company, and their designs shook up the entire interior industry. Soon you could find Memphis everywhere from Target to Taco Bell, and this bright geometrical vibe would be a massive contributor to the birth of Vaporwave. But this isn't about Memphis. It's about corporate Memphis, the slop you see everywhere, especially in giant companies like Facebook, Etsy, and YouTube. In an attempt to appeal to as many people as possible, and do it in as mathematically few shapes as possible, for profits of course, this style just always ends up soulless, and kind of enragingly so. Look no further than the art of Keith Haring to see that you can have simple little guys without them looking so horrifically bad. This looks worse than South Park. That DoorDash commercial that has never left my head in the last 4 years is what's known as 3D Memphis, a particularly disgusting breed of filth. Perfect for what it represents. F tier. Visual pollution. This is visual pollution. If you're an American, you may have been gaslit into thinking that this is glamorous. But city life can often be anything but, and visual pollution represents the worst it has to offer. Do you like advertising? Overstimulation? Do you never want to see the stars in the night sky ever again? Then this is the one for you. In the whole world, New York and maybe like Shibuya are probably the two biggest offenders here, and with no desire to ever enter either, I'm gonna go ahead and toss this one into D tier. Gorpcore. The second I saw this, I knew it was gonna be in the video. At first I thought it was talking about the legendary video Dog Goes Gorp. But when I clicked on it, apparently it's an acronym for Good Old Raisins and Peanuts. It's basically hiking core, I guess? Natural high, pushing yourself, Patagonia, dressing in 100 different layers with 30 pockets each. The funniest thing about this is that on the wiki it says, Gorpcore first gained public recognition when the actor and Texan Matthew McConaughey was purportedly filmed in a viral TikTok looking at Patagonia fleece and saying, "Now this is Gorp." The clip was deleted rapidly after it had been posted and cannot be found anywhere online. I'm speechless. Matthew, what did you mean by this? D. Hiking core. Hiking core is real? This is just Gorpcore with no Matthew McConaughey. What the hell? F tier. Wanderlust.
Wow, look at me. I'm so quirky and special. I like to travel.
Wanderlust. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Everybody loves to fucking travel. Do me a favor and twist your neck like this, and
Wonderland. If there's any piece of media eccentric and timeless enough to deserve an aesthetic, it's definitely Alice in Wonderland. For the people who are lost, trying to find the will and confidence within themselves. I think this is a flat-out amazing aesthetic visually, giving it an immediate S for me. Bizarre architecture, otherworldly creatures, vibrant colors yet dark lighting, mischief at every corner of the maze you find yourself in. The article even makes a connection to The Wizard of Oz, which I think also fits great into this overarching bizarre fantasy vibe that I'm really into. I'd actually really like to tell my own story in this sort of lens someday. Let's start bizarre fantasy, people. Go do your thing, please. Cryptid core. So originally I was going to talk about adventure core so I could make a joke about the literal adventure core from Portal, but also because it was basically just the awesome version of hiking core, embracing curiosity, bounding into the great beautiful unknown. I loved it. Mostly because it reminded me of things like Gravity Falls, X-Files, Twin Peaks, which all kind of remind me of my hometown. All of that got tossed aside though when I discovered Cryptid core, which is basically exactly what I wanted. Adventure core, but with monsters, legends, and mystery. As a cryptid known for being curious, I don't think there's a better place for this than S. Mothcore. Now you might expect me to be all over this, but I am not Mothcore. What Mothcore is supposed to make you feel is a connection to nature, earthy tones, a synergy with plants and fungi and water, but there are other aesthetics that do that better. What I think when I hear Mothcore is, damn girl, you live like this? The only Mothcore people I know are gross, lazy people, the kind who have more than a few mushrooms growing out of their room, and no, they aren't mycologists. F. And next time, leave my people out of this. Clowncore. No, not the song, although that is pretty clowncore. I feel like this is self-explanatory, but just like Vaporwave, this one has a surprising amount of offshoots. Of course, Juggalo, but there's also kidcore, fanfare, circus punk. But I feel like nobody's really specking into the right things here. Because I like the idea of clowncore, but in execution, it's just like a B. B for too broad. I'm going to suggest the creation of Jester Punk, i.e. fans of The Garden and that chess guy from One Piece. It's not to be confused with that one chess piece in The Garden. And Pierrotcore, which would specifically be the sad, homeless, itchy-bearded clowns who have nothing but their dog and a pack of smokes. I adore this shit. I collect sad clowns. I collect a lot of things. Throw those two I just made up into S tier. Prehistoric. When I read this, I was like, how many people out there's #1 aesthetic is really paleocore? But then I remembered Trey the Explainer, and want to collab so bad that I instantly folded and put it in A tier. Who doesn't like dinos? Lindsay Nicole is another prehistoric coded YouTuber too, and I love her stuff. This deserves A tier. People in this community are always super cool and fittingly down to earth. I feel like these people really get me. Prehistory is just a whole lot of curators curating, and that warms my heart. Peoplehood. This might sound crazy, but yes, COVID hit people so hard that enjoying being near people is an aesthetic now. I'd really like to make some sort of mean-spirited joke like, breaking news, Gen Zers discover hanging out for the first time, but no. I'm not gonna hate on the vibe of Community itself, that seems like an uphill battle. Plus I love Community the show, and the aesthetic of that is peoplehood. The show mascot is the Greendale human being. Intimacy, common acts of kindness, the hands of someone you love. I'd be a goddamn supervillain to hate on you making an apple pie with your wife and friends, but I don't know. B tier? After Hours. Why is this one Nexpo too? Either way, despite being one of the most vague and esoteric, I strongly, deeply love After Hours. A. As someone who really loves nighttime walks, the empty darkness, the Midwest skies, the hum of the lights, it gives me a true sense of this melancholic tranquility. If you've ever had a drink late on a weekday and just sat there and appreciated the earth you live on and the body you inhabit, you're probably a fan of this vibe. Coffinwood. Coffinwood is the same as After Hours, except you had too many drinks, wandered into the woods to take a piss, and got turned around for a few minutes. C. Days Core. Days Core is like After Hours taken to the extreme and now the sun is coming up. It's the aesthetic of an all-nighter. The hum of the TV, the haze of color that is dawn, the early morning clear-headedness. If you're a college student with a tough major, you better love Days Core because if you aren't a little nocturnal, you're gonna have a bad time. C. Dullcore. So I'm really sorry if I put one of your random favorite things down super low, because I'm about to give Dullcore a B. If you spend enough time in the Midwest, you either grow up to love or despise the sight of the world overcast. And I'm one of the gray sky lovers. My favorite type of day is when the entire sky is one big cloud. The sun is shining and illuminating the clouds, and it isn't quite raining yet, so it's not dark and it's not wet, but you don't have to squint. And there's that familiar Midwest wind. I'm anything but gloomy when the sky is, though I'll gladly admit I would miss a world with no sunny days. Midwest Gothic. S. You just wouldn't get it, okay? Dream High School. Dream High School kinda sucks. It's the American school vibe. Jocks in Letterman jackets, bullying nerds, the movie Mean Girls, like stereotypical 90s ass stuff. Prom, the big game, bus rides, clubs. Really not my thing. Gonna throw it in D tier, partly because it just makes me shudder. It's only good in Scream and American Horror Story and other campy teen horror. But before I knew what this was, I completely misread the name. And this led me to come up with my own interpretation. Let me introduce you to one of my aesthetics, High School Dream. So what I had originally envisioned when reading Dream High School was the liminality of empty schools. As a kid who got in trouble a lot and snuck off in just about every occasion he got, I really connect with the vibe of a totally empty school, especially during the day. My favorite thing to do whenever I was at a jazz show, a spelling bee, a basketball or volleyball game, just any excuse to be inside of a school after hours, I would make it my personal mission to sneak out of the gym or theater into the massive, silent, empty school. And I'd try to explore as much as I could before I got caught. Well, curiosity killed the moth, and those views are now burned into my brain, and certain interiors really hit like a nostalgia flashbang, especially these pinkish tiles. I make the effort to include these in my art when I can, and the image of a sun-kissed lower middle class elementary school will always be super potent to me. Super biased, yes, but gonna give it an A, an A+. So, on the theme of school, a trend I've noticed while perusing this site is the overwhelming number of academia aesthetics. It makes sense, a lot of these are probably made by teens in school, so school aesthetics are gonna be prevalent. But I didn't expect the rabbit hole to go so deep, so in a bid for time and honestly my utter confusion, let's do a bit of an academia lightning round, shall we? Classic academia. D. Nerd. Dark academia. F. This one spawned all the spin-offs. You're not as smart as you think you are. Stop glamorizing private schooling. Darkest academia. Would you even believe me if I didn't have a screenshot to prove this was real? F. Get a life. Ocean academia. Gotta say, learning about the ocean is kinda badass. I'm not gonna hate on the fascination with the deep. I'll give it a C for the sea. Cryptid academia. Poser. F. Goblin academia. Okay, come on. Internet academia. F tier, because I assume this meant edutainment, which is the greatest genre conceived by man, but it's actually just like remote learning. Edutainment would have gotten an S, by the way. I'm gonna move on because I'm already sick of academia, but there's literally dozens more, like romantic, theater, or chaotic.
Bullshit.
Or horror, witchy, and autumn.
Derivative.
There's even a whole disturbing rainbow of these things, other than dark, darker, darkest light, lighter, lightest, pastel, vibrant, red, green. Put them all in F, I say. This goes way deeper too. I even found a page detailing a list of deleted aesthetics such as rural academia, pink fade academia, neon academia, and royal abomination academia. How these didn't meet the quote-unquote requirements, I don't know. It all just seems so up its own ass. I think the A word I'm going to refuse to say out of fear of ODing on it is a leech on this poor community. Christian Girl Autumn. I'm trying not to make fun of Christians or basic white women, so let's make this quick. Immediately gonna go near the bottom because it originates from a single joke tweet. What an origin story. Also, I hate pumpkin and coffee. I'll be generous and say D though, because fall is the best season and I could fuck up some Uggs. Grand Millennial. Do you like fine china, pattern on pattern quilts, wicker baskets, and black and white? Then you may consider yourself a Grand Millennial. Someone who finds a lot of value in where they came from. Keep in mind, you don't need a grandma to act like one though, and some people just like the old-fashioned traditions of the elderly lifestyle. Or the Grandma's Kisses episode of SpongeBob. What do you expect me to do, shit on somebody for living like they're retired? I love my grandma. A. Vintage British Sportsman. How big of a prick you gotta be to dress up like this in 2024 and roleplay some of the most abhorrently ignorant people to ever live? I like Pride and Prejudice more than the next guy, but come on, the key motifs of this are listed as competition, wealth, pride, and tradition. If I saw some jockey boy snicker at me from atop his horse, I'm pulling him off and curb stomping him until he goes, "Oh, good heavens, release me!" F tier. Victorian urban poverty. So, yeah. Sickly, impoverished Victorian children stuck working 16 hours a day in factories and coal mines is now a glamorous new aesthetic for you to daydream about. Although I might be wrong about the whole new part. Apparently this aesthetic goes back to the Victorian itself. Rich people at the time had an odd obsession with the lower class people, buying expensive paintings of them and even cosplaying as them just for gits and jiggles. Which makes it even more uncomfortable. F tier. I'd rather be gutted by Jack the Ripper than put "spare some change, sir" in my Twitter bio. Metrosexual. So I know this sounds like an orientation, but it really just means a guy that spends a lot of time and money on his looks. A heterosexual in a metropolitan area, aka usually flirtatious city boys in tight suits. You'd probably put this in F tier, but if you've seen Community and know Jeff Winger as well as I do, you'd know that these guys have the capacity to be more than their $500 handcrafted Italian sink faucets and almond face scrub that they only make in Finland. I like Jeff, and Neil Patrick Harris's character from How I Met Your Mother, even though I don't really like that show, and I like Justin Timberlake too. The website also lists Dio on there as one, I guess. Didn't list any of the other ones I mentioned, but it did mention that. See? Burlesque. I find the burlesque vibe scary, being surrounded by exploited women who won't make it past their 40s and the coked out men who put them there. Now, if you want to make something spooky, this might be a good vibe though. For instance, Black Ops 3 Shadows of Evil. I love the big band sound, and that burlesque feeling is enchanting, and it feels somewhat poisoning, but like D. If this is your aesthetic, I'm worried for you. Kinder. Trying to brush past that horrendously big flashing red flag of a title, this is just psycho ladycore, and not in the awesome way, I mean like crazy crazy. Like, the website credits the creator as Courtney Love. Bright pinks, blonde hair that's been messed up, running mascara. No offense, but if your aesthetic is being a mess, you're probably a mess. D. Grindhouse. One hell of a fancy way to say gore porn. Can I even say those words on here? This would probably go in F if the movie Death Proof didn't exist, and it would go in C if that one scene in Death Proof didn't exist, so D. B-movie horror. Okay, listen, I love B-movies, especially horror. Throw on some Chopping Mall, Troll 2, Ice Cream Man, Killer Clowns, I'm down. But what exactly is the aesthetic of a B-movie? Just being a product of a low budget? Having weird-ass lines of dialogue that make you ask what the hell you're even watching? These all seem pretty different, no? I don't like how loose and vague this aesthetic is. Because I'm now an expert in the taxonomy of vibes, I'm gonna go ahead and say something can be B-movie coded, like possibly in Michigan, but in my opinion that doesn't necessarily mean it deserves its own aesthetic. I know fundamentally this is no different from low poly, the aesthetic of limitation in your medium, but unlike that it just doesn't really evoke anything in me, no deep thoughts or strong feelings. See? Teenagers in the Woods.
Enjoyable, soft lips, just the right level of moisture.
Would you like to do it again?
No.
Teenagers in the Woods. A tale as old as, I don't know, the 70s. As someone who hates the Friday the 13th series, check out Jalloween if you want to know why, I'm really not a fan of Teenagers in the Woods. Motifs of this one include wonders such as risk-taking and bad decisions. I've always heard Sleepaway Camp is pretty creepy, and I always thought The Curse of Camp Cold Lake was one of the scariest Goosebumps books. The main character of this horrifically drowns, and R.L. Stine vividly describes it, and the image of yellow spots appearing in your clouded vision as your lungs fill with water has never escaped my mind. I was going to say C, but then I remembered how scary the woods felt when I was a young Moth Scout. Guess I'll slide it a B. But how and why do scary movies fail so hard to make the woods as terrifying as they really are? That primal unknown might be the most instinctual fear in our entire genetic code. You'd think it'd be easier to exploit. Catholic horror. This one is a little similar to how I dislike 50s suburbia but can still enjoy Atom Punk. I'm not a big fan of Catholicism. I didn't go to Catholic school, but I did go to a strange after-school Jesus class that met in a Catholic school, and what I remember from that is doodling bugs on my Bible picture book and the creepy empty halls in the dark. Maybe this is where my fascination for empty places came from. Either way, between that and the scary, nearly always bloody art of Jesus and Catholicism, I've always associated the religion with a vibe of horror, and that definitely didn't get remedied after seeing The Exorcist for the first time. Again, very biased, but the medieval vibe of Catholicism along with its historical presence really do wonders when paired with the spooky stuff. I like Catholic horror. It's effective. It's not foolproof though, because that nun movie sucks. B tier. If you want to hear more horror takes, check out Jalloween, for real. Seriously, look at how many views this thing got. Man, what the hell? Starflesh. So from the second I read this name, I knew I'd have to cover this one. To say that it piqued my interest would be an understatement. If I had to describe it simply, I would say it's the vibe of creatures that have been unfrozen. Half of this vibe is animalistic rage, red eyes, blood-soaked teeth, clawed, webbed hands, and scales. And it's married with this uncanny sense of pure beauty. Pearls, opals, iridescence, crystal clear glass and ice, fragility. I've always loved The Thing, and this cool, eerie, yet wholly natural albino look is insanely alluring. There's a reason sirens are a big part of this too. It's meant to be alluring. So it's successful art that tells a story, makes me think, and leaves me wanting more? Sounds like an S to me. Indicolite. Indicolite is the rarest type of tourmaline gem on Earth, and if there's any mineral deserving of a cult-like aesthetic, I'd say it's this. Other than maybe opal, but I'm gonna chalk that up to birthstone bias. Similar to the iridescence of Starflesh, this Alice blue color this community is focused on is mesmerizing. Reminds me of elegance, water, self-reflection. I fuck with this one heavy. A tier. Goth. What do I even say about goth? While I was perusing the article about it, I saw its motifs include open-mindedness, creativity, individuality, intellectualism, existentialism, eclecticism, and tongue-in-cheek self-awareness. But then I read further and discovered the creation of this movement is bands like Bauhaus and Siouxsie and the Banshees. While I'm not goth myself, I'm realizing I really like goth media, and the gothic movement in general is always going to be a W. A tier. Bubble goth. If Starflesh and Indicolite taught me anything, it's that if you make something dull and hazy, yet somehow hypnotizingly sparkly, I'm gonna clap like a seal. Dip a goth in bleach, and unsurprisingly, I'm there. This really is just light mode goth, and for some reason I really can't help myself but enjoy it a lot. Not quite enough to be S, but A is the lowest I'll go. Triple Chic. Everyone's seen this, but I'm just amazed now, after my millions of years of life, I'm finally learning its name. Triple Chic is that 2009 kinda black and white pattern work with pops of intermittent pink, always for some reason including the Eiffel Tower or other vaguely French things like pastries, dress forms, and poodles. And while I do love poodles, this one just screams midlife crisis to me, and for that it gets a C. Decora. This is if Fruity Pebbles was a person. Cutesy maximalism, I like it. B tier. Scene. There was once a time in my life where I would have called these S tier. Now a Scene kid is lucky to scrape by with a D. A brighter and far more annoying emo spin-off, Scene is actually one of the first instances in history of posers. The damage these people did to Invader Zim, Domo, and Hello Kitty is irreparable. And no, I don't know Whitechapel, I don't care about Pierce the Veil, I don't like Panic at the Disco, I dislike My Chemical Romance, I couldn't care less about Black Veil Brides, I hate Fall Out Boy, and Skrillex sucks. You guys can stay though. Acid design. I didn't know the name of it at first, but has anybody else noticed this style of stuff everywhere the past few years? I feel like I've just always been sick of it. It insists upon itself. It's not offensively bad or anything, and I like a good smiley face as much as the next guy, but this wacky, chaotic screen print two-tone aesthetic is just so whatever to me. C. Smilecore. I feel like it should be Smileycore, but that's fine. I also feel compelled to say S tier? Maybe that's just because of the alliteration, but I feel like the smiley face has a non-corporeal hold on me. Maybe because I feel like it's such a uniquely human thing. This pattern is meaningless to every animal on Earth but humans, but every human would know exactly what it means. I like what it stands for, and hey, I like yellow too. This shit is like Hypnotoad to me though. I think it's actually controlling me. I couldn't put this lower if I wanted to, and now I'm seriously worried about my free will. S. Goblin Core. This one has like the most developed wiki page by far for some reason. So there's probably going to be a surprising amount of Goblin Core stans defending their motherland in the comments, but I really don't care. This one is meh. It's just cottagecore or insert naturey aesthetic equivalent, but you just also like to collect little knickknacks. I mean, I like little trinkets as much as the next guy, but something's off about this. I feel like it's trying too hard. Plus, wouldn't gnomes make more sense? Whatever. See? Wormcore. Of all the ones that are just screaming, haha, look at how quirky I am, this one might be the worst offender, but also potentially the only one I'll let slide. I mean, it's not going to get any higher than like a D. It's literally just a worm on a string, not much of an aesthetic. I did learn some hilarious lore though, which is that these guys became a meme because people in the Furby community, which I guess is a thing, would always joke about these being what they ate. And yeah, I can see it. That's a Furby's food. Elsagate. Do people still remember this? The horrible landscape of children's content on this website that egged YouTube into squirting out YouTube kids? Yeah, I didn't want to either, but apparently nowadays you can make this your aesthetic for the low price of your entire dignity. Those Elsa Foot Doctor Flash games are like seared into my brain, and I am truly, genuinely scared for the generation of children who grew up watching Hulk Cuck Spider-Man during a pimple popper. Cobson Core. Bro. F. I am not talking about Wojaks. I could at least appreciate it if it was like an overarching rage comic aesthetic, but no. Less than just the Wojaks, Cobson Core is apparently just iterations of this one chud. You poor people must be so miserable. Cyberstyling. Watch and learn is a real internet aesthetic bounds onto the scene. Well, it did like 20 years ago, but dress-up games. There's some quite disturbing media in modern day with the overlap between girly games and Elsagate, but I'm going to choose to ignore that because one is definitely poisoning the other. I'm not exactly sure why, but I spent hours on these dress-up games as a kid. Personalization has always been fun to me. B tier. Literally all I care about in video games is customizing my character and building their base, so physiologically I can't put this any lower than B. It's in my bloodstream at this point, probably my DNA and shit too. Expiritualism. Expiritualism is some kind of shitty new weird core blah blah blah, say as many buzzwords as you want, I just don't care anymore. Under this misconceptions tab, which I don't think is present on any other aesthetics page, we see that the most common misconception about this aesthetic is that it's an aesthetic. It's not, it's actually an art movement. Wow. Whoever wrote that is probably in the hospital for breaking their arm jerking themselves off. It's not an aesthetic. If it's not an aesthetic, delete it from the wiki. F tier. MS Paint. It's MS Paint. My two favorite artists are probably David Firth and Pilot Red Sun, so that should tell you everything you need to know about my takes on this style. I was gonna say S, but then I remembered Homestuck exists, so A. Italian Futurism. Futurism was an art movement famous for its dynamic shapeliness and gaze toward the beyond. In the early 1900s, Italy wanted to forget their past and look towards a booming future, thus the birth of Futurismo. Futurism wound up being so incredibly influential that things like Art Deco, Dadaism, and even Surrealism itself owe their identity to this era of bizarrely entrancing work. I'm gonna give Futurism an S tier, not only because it laid the groundwork for perhaps the vast majority of modern art, but also because I happen to know a moth who might be a little Italian himself. Brutalism. So this actually isn't on the aesthetics wiki, but I couldn't not cover brutalism. If you've never heard of it, it's called that because it's the brutal approach to design. Get the job done, no bells or whistles. You want a house? Here's a cement cube. You want a phone? It's got a button for 911 and a button for mom. Brutalism has its roots in communist countries, mostly because its cost effectiveness, but it didn't originate from communism. It was a movement which had been stirring in Europe for quite some time. Most people find this utilitarian look alienating to say the least and probably expect me to trash on it, but I just can't. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but there's something special happening here. I love the dichotomy between brutalist buildings and lush greenery, creating this haunting, brutal zen. Some may call it dystopian, but I call it misunderstood. I can't stop with the alliteration, so brutalism gets a B. Stop demolishing these obelisks of the past and keep experimenting with affordable housing. Retrofuturism. Retrofuturism is just as, if not more of a blanket term than even Vaporwave, easily throwing it up to S tier right away. All it really means is a view of the future from our past, so robot movies from the 50s, or Peter Quill being a cool spaceman yet still watching porn on Laserdisc or whatever, stuff like that. There are dozens of types, so let's just blaze through a few. Atom Punk. Also known as Ray Punk, which I think is cooler, this is the 50s one I was talking about. This one is awesome, I'm gonna give it an A. It reminds me of the robot from that one episode of SpongeBob or the entirety of Zathura. Also, look at some of this art. Diesel Punk. B. It's just Bioshock. Steampunk. C. Used to love this one maybe 10-15 years ago, but come on, the future is now. And the top hat and goggles were never not tacky. Cyberpunk. Gonna be controversial and say D. Cyberpunk has become the Marvel movie of aesthetics, just schlock almost. And soon, not for you, but for me, it'll just be another mark on the belt of retrofuturism. Steelpunk. Steelpunk is big machinery, giant plates of riveted metal. Think of that whale submarine in Flapjack, or the inside of the Krusty Krab, or Gru's car. I'm a fan of this whole evil maxing thing we got going on here. B. I Spy. Think of those amazing I Spy books and their art by Walter Wick. This is the definitive aesthetic of childhood wonder. This one really reminds me of the Jumpstart Kindergarten game I would play on my family computer down in the basement, sometimes called Trinket Core. This one is just all about the comfort of your childhood bedroom. Glow-in-the-dark stars on your ceiling, Polaroids on the wall, carpet on the floor, and a smile on your face. Everything is an adventure, and everything feels magic. Maybe I was a kid with too many rainy days stuck in my room, or stuck in the library reading I Spy books, but this one is definitely me. Mabel from Gravity Falls is definitely I Spy coded. Have any of you seen the movie Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium? I just discovered why that movie resonates with me so much. It's this. Thank you, I Spy, and thank you, Walter Wick, for all the amazing memories. S tier. And that's kind of all, at least for part 1. Because of low viewership, I've had to cancel a few part 2s, so if you want to see this series become a series, then like, comment, subscribe, and share this around. Before I go, I will say there are some definite gaps in this list of aesthetics. I already mentioned the lack of clowncore diversity on this board, but there are plenty of other things I think are vibey enough to end up becoming something more. For instance, I was really disappointed with the lack of how many cowboy aesthetics there were. Maybe I just couldn't find them under whatever strange name they've been given, but come on. Like, give me Frontier Wave. Wait, that's a thing? What's it called? Tumblewave? Yeah, that's pretty good. But see, how am I supposed to find that? And also, no way there's no puppet core. Between the vibe of a nice game of pool, the felt section of Homestuck, which is unironically the best and only part to me, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, it's even got nostalgia for kids of all ages because of Sesame Street, so how is there no felt core, Silkwave, something? Something else that was on my radar that never popped up is an aesthetic revolving around masks. The concept of masks is one of the most innately human things there is. The topic goes so far, and there's an ungodly amount to discuss. It's why I've always wanted to make a full-length documentary on masks and what they mean for the psyche of the human experience. But maybe I should relax, I'm not Vsauce. Or... Mascot core was also a thing I had my eye out for. Something you'd know I'm really into if you've spent any time on this channel outside of my stupid JJK stuff. And my last Hail Mary is the Mr. Men Show. Does anybody remember this? You could milk this into a whole glass of aesthetic, trust me, it'll be a thing. My patrons and my Discord boosters got to choose some of the topics for this video. So, if you'd like to play a part in my videos, or just support me on Patreon like my Emperor's Gambit 935, Hoops McCann, Daymare, or Joe Wheelcar, that would be fantastic. Or you can just follow me on social media and chat with me and other bugs in my Discord server. Sometimes I stream games in there too. All of that, along with the aesthetics wiki, are going to be down in the description, so go peep all that out. Remember to head to vapor95.com/Jalamoth or use code Jalamoth at checkout for a bangin' discount. I'm gonna try to get this done, so screw a long schmaltzy outro. Thank you for your time, I love you, and as always, stay curious. Now,
Everyone!